We are a little bit slow, but slow and steady wins the race. So I'm here to just say a few introductory remarks regarding this afternoon session, which is really the close into the world. And the presenters will be talking about the educator preparation support program, presentation of research assessment program, presentation on forms of partnerships and implementation model and so forth. So very, very interesting closing evening. Okay. So since I have 5 minutes, I want to say something about the C-learning. If we look a little bit, we'll find that we are all same in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. Same. I always tell people and ask the question, what is the first thing that the children do when they are born, right after the birth? What is the thing that the child does after the birth? The first thing that the child does is crying. By crying, the child is not asking for a lengthy discourse on any religion. The child is asking for C-learning, probably. The child is asking for loving kindness, love from the mother and so forth, and that love also, interesting, the love also unconditional love, not the business love that we do when we are grown up, okay? Through this C-learning and other experiences, what we are really saying is, let us use more soft power than hard power. Soft power is power of culture, power of education. Hard power is power of gun, which His Holiness said is now outdated. Okay, so we should tell strongly to those people who are resorting to weapons that if you want to do outdated things, go ahead. You are behind the schedule. Okay? If you look at any culture, any civilization, the success and flourishment of that culture, that civilization is based on ethics. If you look at the law of the land of a particular country, which has different religions, different cultures, normally you find that law of land based more or less, whether they use the term or not, based on secular ethics. If you look at the charters of human rights, it's also, I think, secular ethics. So it's all there. So what we need to now know is education is not equal to reading, writing, and mathematics. Education is for human flourishment. Education is for personal development. And that personal flourishment and growth comes through ethics. Ethics rooted in compassion and discernment, which we have been talking about. Now, in developing true compassion, discernment, and wisdom is so important. I give you a few examples. If you develop a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of discernment, you will come to understand there is no need to kill people, people will die. Anyway, there's no need to bring more suffering, people are suffering already. And then we need to know, with discernment, we'll know much of the suffering that we are experiencing today is unfortunately man-made. His Holiness touched global warming, which is a case of swimming or sinking together. So secular ethics is saying that just as we take care of our body, we need to take care of our mind. At the end of the day, mind is the boss, not the body. And much of the problem that we see in the world today is due to mental starvation, because you never given any food to the mind. You only cater to the body and cater to the senses. So secular ethics is saying The pleasure that you get through engaging your senses will not bring long-lasting happiness. Reflect back, contemplate, develop mindfulness, awareness, and discover the inner resources. The external resources have limitation. We are already seeing the limit of external resources. Internal resources reach, but unfortunately not explored. So let us explore the inner resources. This sea learning has been compared to drinking water. Religions are like coffee and tea. If you like coffee, wonderful, you take coffee, but it's not necessary that others should also take coffee. Depending upon your choice, your predisposition, you like coffee, okay, you like tea, okay. But without it, you can also survive. But without water, you won't survive. Number one, I'm trying to make a point here, okay? So secular, please drink the water of secular ethics. And at the same time, remember that even the coffee and the tea that you are drinking, the highest percentage is made of water. Another point that I noticed during the discussion was people are still thinking, okay, this C-learning program, curriculum will be taught in the classroom, maybe in the colleges and so forth. So what about us, the elders? We don't have a role to play. Wrong, completely wrong. Because we need to practice that ethics right from today, how you use your water, whether you are contributing to the pollution of the air, and so many things. Share this wonderful news to others. So we all have to play the role to make the difference. So don't leave it to the educators or teachers. Another very important thing that we need to notice by studying this secular ethics is, let us try to understand the nature and live like the nature. If you look at the nature, if there is a flood, it will not make discrimination, who is your enemy, who is your friend. It will shake everybody. If there's a famine, we'll all suffer from it. There's no discrimination. The discriminations are made by stupid human mind based on ignorance. Therefore, let us go closer to the mind, especially discernment in intelligence. So I have not much time. I will conclude by saying that the problems that we are facing today is because we are unable to develop wisdom. The speed by which we are developing our wisdom is unable to equal the speed of science and technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Geshe Lakhdor, for those inspiring words. And just a few more announcements before I invite my colleagues up onto the stage. The questions that I mentioned that you can write that will be handled in the concluding expert panel, there's actually a bowl at the water station at the end of this aisle, right there. So that's the place where you can put your questions. So if you write your questions, and then if you could have them there, prior to the concluding panel, we will collect them and use them for that. So thank you so much. Another announcement is that it has been noted that someone accidentally took another person's bag, the blue launch bag. And so there's a fine lady here who is missing her purse and her keys. So if you could check your bag, please, and make sure that it is your own bag and you don't have someone else's purse and keys in it, that you didn't accidentally take someone else's bag. That would be greatly appreciated. If you do find that you accidentally took the wrong bag, if you could give it to my colleague, Carol Beck. Carol, could you stand up, please? Please come to the front and give it to Carol, and then we'll get it back to its rightful owner. And lastly, because of our slight delay in starting, we will go about 15-20 minutes later and end around 3:15, 3:20. So thank you for your patience. Immediately following that, at 3:30, we have a special meeting for the members of our International Program Committee, and that will be here in this room. So could the members of the International Program Committee and others who have been invited to that planning meeting remain in this room. But for the others, if you're not in that meeting, if you could please clear the room for us, that would be wonderful. So now I'd like to invite my colleagues, Ms. Christian Tenari and Ms. Lindy Sedevin-Demi, to come and present on the educator preparation and support. Thank you.
Will I ask for it? Sure. Hello, everyone. We're ready for the PowerPoint for our presentation. Do we have a clicker?
Hi, I'm Lindy Sedevin-Demi, the project coordinator for C-Learning, and this is Krista Tenari, and we're here to talk just for a short while about educator preparation and support, what we currently have and what we have planned.
Okay, so as you are familiar, we have an educator online platform and other resources and materials. So we just wanted to make sure it's super clear in everyone's mind exactly what resources you now have at your fingertips and that will be accessible to you online as well. So this is our very brief presentation after you will know exactly what we have available to you. So our vision for our educator preparation program is that every single educator will be provided with the C-Learning tools that they need to help their students thrive. And by thrive and flourish, we mean happiness, well-being, all of those things that we've been discussing together. So we will go over three things: educational resources that are available, a few of our answers to what we anticipate would be your frequently asked questions, and then a few tips on getting started. So, C101, hopefully you were with us this morning and you saw the presentation of our online educator platform. Our orientation course there, which of course is free to you, you just need to register, is called C101. And I remember Tyra Lynn mentioning this morning that it will include a My Plan document that you will work on throughout your engagement with the platform, so that at the end of the program, you will be able to have that document and use that for your purposes. We also have curriculum available for students. You all have the early elementary version in your bag. You will be able to access online the middle school version and the late elementary version as well. And this is available for ages 5 to 14 years. Lastly, we have the C-Learning Companion, and that is also in your bag. And it's this yellow book. And in that book is an implementation guide, which I will be going over a few parts of that with you.
Okay, so how do we get started with C-Learning? The first step is to go onto the C101 course and take those the 6 to 8 hours to complete those 7 modules. And then after that, what you do could go in a variety of different directions. What teachers have done in the past is just jump right in. And you can see here in some of these images, we have some photos from 2 Atlanta, Georgia schools and 1 from Jordan. And these are just different classrooms where teachers decided to jump into the curriculum in the way that they thought fit their context the best. You also could spend time reading the framework and the companion book if you wanted to do that. There's a variety of ways that you could jump in after you take the online course. So C101, you heard about this earlier today. Just to be crystal clear, it's free and accessible to anyone. It's free to a classroom teacher, to an administrator, even a parent who wanted to check out what the program was all about is able to take the course. We anticipate it taking about 6 to 8 hours, done on your own time. And you, at the end of it, you would access the curriculum. And throughout, you'd access some videos and reflective practices and experiential activities, many of which mirror what is in the curriculum for kids. And then the My Plan document shows up in each module, so you can keep track of your own progress. Oh, and finally, which I think many of you received these copies at the break, there are currently three levels of curriculum that are available. early elementary, late elementary, and middle school, and we have in development the high school curriculum, which should be ready for trials this fall. Each of these levels that are now available contain about 40 learning experiences, which each of which takes between 20 and 40 minutes to complete. And teachers sometimes break them up over different periods in their classrooms, just whatever works best for them.
Okay, so I think we told you those things twice now. Did everyone get it? All right, hopefully you have gotten that and know where to find your curriculum and your materials. So I just briefly want to point your attention to the C-Learning Companion, which is that yellow book in your bag. And I want to point out that the implementation guide starts on page 84. And in that get started with the C-Learning program, as well as some other information about principles for creating a compassionate classroom. There's information in there about cultural context and changing the curriculum to make it really relevant to your group and your students. There's also some information there about the role of the C-Learning educator. So it reviews our expectations about yourself as a C-Learning educator and what that means. And what we really mean by it is that you become a facilitator of the process. So it is absolutely not necessary that you feel like you are an expert in the program before you begin teaching the program. I said it was not necessary. So you can get started with the program even if you feel that you're still becoming familiar and learning it yourself. Now this might sound a little unusual.
Can I add something to that?
I'm sorry?
Can I add something to that?
Yes, add something to it, Lindy.
And all of the teachers whose work we've shown to you and who we've received feedback from are not experts in the curriculum. We're all still learning how to teach this material.
Right. And I think that's maybe a little bit different from some other programs, or maybe even a little bit different in terms of your understanding of best practices or something like that. But it's really important to us that people begin using the curriculum and then give us feedback and also reflect yourself on how it's working. And that's one of the ways that we actually improve it together and can create something that really will be meeting everyone's needs. So we encourage you to not hesitate about that and to, of course, take the online program that we have, and also there will be some additional workshops, but don't hesitate to get started and to share with your students that you are on a learning journey together and that you might have questions and you might not know some of the answers, and questioning is a big part of our C-Learning process. And it is a wonderful thing, actually, to question together with your students and investigate together with them some of the things that you might not know. And that will actually enable you to have more of a constructivist approach and an inquiry approach and model the use of scientific thinking and investigation together, even with these other kinds of topics about our mind and our emotions. So please feel free to do that. And then lastly, a few pages into the guide, I believe it's on page 89, there's a section there that says how to get started if your time is very short. And we suggest a few key practices from the curriculum that you can pull out. Some of them are reflection exercises or mindfulness exercises, a gratitude practice, compassion practice. And you can use those practices however you like throughout your day if you're not able to do full lessons at first, but want to get started with C-Learning in a smaller way to begin to get familiar with it and get your students familiar with it.
So a big question that we often get about C-Learning is, can this program stand alone, or can it complement another program? The quick and short answer is both. It can do both of those things. We have several examples from the field that are currently in operation. For example, some teachers that use C-Learning have a mandated SEL curriculum that they must use. These teachers who've chosen to also incorporate C-Learning have found other places in their day, maybe during circle time or during advisory or during other times where they can put C-Learning in. At the high school level, that's happening in academic classes where an English teacher or an art teacher brings in a C-Learning lesson and incorporates the academic content into the C-Learning work. We also have, as been mentioned yesterday, a couple different teachers that have standalone elective classes that kids who experience C-learning 4 to 5 days a week straight. And you heard from one of the student panelists yesterday who said she wished she had C-learning more often, but she only had it 1 day a week. We also have other teachers, and I'm one of them, who's teaching C-learning in an after-school program 1 day a week as well. So there's many different ways that you can bring C-learning to your students. Flexibility is key, and if you really want to bring it, you probably can find an opening that you can make that happen. So here's the implementation opportunities I just was speaking of. In some of the schools where C-learning is happening now, it's only happening in one classroom because there's a very motivated teacher who really wanted to bring that to her students. In other schools, it's a smattering of 1 or 2 teachers, and there are some schools you heard from the kids yesterday that entire schools are operating with C-learning. And then there's other variety of options that I mentioned earlier, after-school programs, advisory, or homeroom.
Okay, so one thing many of you have asked members of our team about is how to make a case for C-learning with your principals, administrators, parents, other stakeholders in your community. You are very excited about it. You would like them to get very excited about it, but you know that you need some additional information to share with them to make that happen. So these are a few of our suggestions, and we will be in the next probably few weeks making sure that we have additional resources online that you can access to help you with some of these suggestions here. Because our first one is to share evidence about how social emotional learning can impact students and benefit students in really positive ways. And we have research from the US and also internationally that we can place online for you to grab. Connect to ongoing initiatives. So it doesn't have to be the case that C-learning is the new thing that everyone will now do at your school. You can actually connect it to another initiative that your school already is doing and cares a great deal about. So the happiness curriculum is a great example where C-learning can be added to that and enhance that program and be very beneficial. Explain how C-learning meets the needs of your mission or your vision for your organization. So in what way does the principles of C-learning and the vision of C-learning itself fit with your organizational culture as it stands now? And hopefully there'll be ways that it does fit with it.
And so an idea is to create a visual of your school's mission or goals or values, and then the C-learning components or principles of C-learning, just creating a visual for your administration to see how actually C-learning does fit with what you all are already trying to do.
And then what you want to do is you want to present a plan to get started. So even if it's just a preliminary plan with some ideas, come with a proposal that suggests how you and other people that you've gathered together might be able to support the initiative and get the initiative started. So instead of going and saying, here, we want you to do this, and thinking that someone else will figure it out or respond to that in some way, see if you can gather together a group of interested people and come up with your own plans that you can present and then discuss that with the group of people you would like to convince to bring C-learning. And also, finally, see if you can get a few teachers demonstrating some of the C-learning lessons, either with students or adults, even if you haven't used the full curriculum, so they can get a taste for it and begin to see how interesting it is and what results it might bring. Okay, so in the future, we will also be planning to build out our online platform and have more courses you can take there. We will also be continuing to do some face-to-face workshops. However, we have a limited capacity, as you know, because we're a smaller group of people. So we are right now conceiving of the ways that we might offer regional events or other types of workshops that will serve the need that exists. It is our hope, though, that we have regional networks developing and that we can train groups of people who can then provide training in their own region and area. And that way, we will continue to spread the learning and the growth, all of us together.
Okay.
So let Lindy describe the ways that we can stay connected, and
So-
this will be the last part.
Yeah, and finally, this is just the different ways that we can stay connected. There's the email address, the general email address at clearning@emory.edu. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and a little bit on Twitter. And also, you could sign up for the newsletter, which is down here at the bottom, and it's helpful if you sign yourself up for it, so it doesn't look like we're spamming you. So. If you could, it's tinyurl.com/c-newsletter, and that should take you to just a really short sign-up form. Yes, if you have any questions or would like to post anything, please feel free to do that, and we'll get in touch with you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about research and assessment as soon as I get the PowerPoint up. And I don't have the clickers. And could one of you lovely, do you have the clicker? Ah, okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, so research and assessment. So when we think about research and assessment, we really think about it in different domains. We have the implementation and evaluation component, which is critical. We also have concept development, which my colleague Tenzin Sanam is going to talk a bit more about. And we have our global partnerships. And C-learning research really sits at the intersection of these three domains. Now, implementation. We all want to jump into student assessment because we really care about what's happening for the students. But we really need to take a measured approach and try to understand that there is a process, okay? And so when we think about implementation and the process, these are 4 questions that we want to ask ourselves. Is the program being delivered as it is designed? Does the program design need to be changed or modified in any way? Is the program reaching the people it was designed to reach? And does the program impact the outcomes it was designed to impact? When we think through the process of implementation through the lens of these different questions, we're not just focusing on student outcomes, we're also focusing on things that lead up to bringing C into the classroom. And this is really critical because we want to make sure that what we're doing as far as training and preparation is actually allowing us to see the maximum effectiveness of the program itself on our students. Now, when we look at implementation science, it can be very, we can take a staged approach, but this isn't always an approach that is either linear or circular. It's often recursive, it's often iterative, and it often takes a lot of different processing and time components. What we did is we used 2 different models when we thought about our implementation approach. We thought through what the National Institutes of Health, their staged model recommends, and we also looked at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and how they approach implementation science with their international partners, particularly with regards to children's programs. And so what we came up with is this process, and I want you to remember the words that Lindy and Krista just talked about, because this is the implementation process. Please do not look at this and say, oh, I cannot bring this into my classroom. If you're interested in research, if you're interested in implementation and evaluation at this level, it is a process that you want to go through and that we want to be in conversation with. But I don't want it to scare you off and not bring it into your classroom. But for those who engage with local interests and needs, we want to talk about translations and if you have the capacity for that. We want to talk about partnerships, who is going to be doing what, and do we need to make any adaptations, and what are the deliverables that you are interested in. We want to talk a little bit about data management and capacity. For those who may not be interested in research output, sort of publications and things that traditionally we think about as research, but you're interested in a very stepwise and controlled evaluation process. We want to talk about what your plan is. And if you are interested in research, we need to be mindful of any sort of ethical review processes that need to be considered. At Emory University, if you partner with us, we do have an ethical review board. And so there's a process through which we have to go through that board and do particular types of planning so that we can move forward with the research in an ethical way. And then, of course, we want to move towards piloting and any amendments and going through the training process, all before we get to this student assessment. So when we think about evaluation, evaluation comes at all of these different levels. It's not just about what we see with the students in the classroom, but there are processes that we have to go through, okay, before we get there if we want to see maximum effectiveness. And I just wanted to show you that this is also a recursive and iterative process, and all of this information feeds into, this is what our process chart looks like, so that we can move from this very highly evidence-informed program to a very strong evidence-based. This includes qualitative work, quantitative work, mixed methods. It includes theory development, process evaluation, all of these different components. And so we welcome all of you who are interested to join us within this process. So now I'm going to invite my colleague, Tenzin Sanam, to come up and talk a little bit about concept development.
Thank you. As Taryn mentioned, that we want to move from an evidence-based to an evidence-informed to an evidence-based program. I want to talk about the concept development that is essential component of our C-learning research to increase its reach and effectiveness. The concept development is an integral part of our implementation and evaluation process, and also related to our global partnership. So we think of concept development in terms of three aspects: alignment, concepts, and context. Although I'll be talking about these three things independently, they are all interrelated. Since we just launched the C-learning, in order to create awareness and mobilize adoption of C-learning internationally, there are things we can start doing now. For that, we want to explore how C-learning framework, curriculum, and teacher preparation platforms aligns with the goals of various academic and institutions internationally. We call this the alignment. So for example, we have the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that was adopted in 2015 by 193 countries, has this mission of creating a peace and prosperous world. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by UN members in achieving this agenda aligns closely with the goals of C-learning framework and curriculum. Concepts such as well-being, quality education, and responsible consumption and production in the UN Sustainable Development Goals have commonality with what we want to accomplish in the C-learning program. Yet another example is the International Baccalaureate program that has schools in over 126 countries and serves over 1 million students. The International Baccalaureate has this mission to develop active, compassionate, and lifelong learners, and have come up with what is called as the IB profile learners, IB learner profiles. Qualities embodied in these IB learner profiles includes characteristics such as open-minded, caring, principles, which are again the qualities that C-learning aspires to cultivate through our framework, curriculum, and the education preparation programs. And you also heard yesterday Dan Goleman speak about C-learning being the SEL 2.0. So the social emotional learning has a wide footprint around the world. Many of the C-learning concepts are based on the SEL framework, known widely as CASEL framework, and that includes development of core competencies such as self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship skills. Therefore, adopting C-learning in the existing SEL programs around the world should be consistent with the goals of the SEL programs, with these goals of these SEL programs. Another example that's quite relevant to the place we are having this global launch today, in Delhi, they have adopted this happiness curriculum. And yesterday, the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi was really interested in adopting the C learning curriculum. So we are hoping to find ways to explore how C learning can complement with the happiness curriculum that the Delhi is implementing currently. So therefore, we hope to work on publications, participate in conferences and seminars to actively explore how we can bring C learning curricula and framework that aligns and complements with these various programs around the globe. Sorry, I forgot to click that. And the next is the concepts. As we bring C learning to international community, it is critical for us to understand how the concepts that are in C learning are understood across different cultures, languages, and communities. We do not experience world directly. Our experiences are always mediated through language, our social interaction, and our prior experiences. So from a research standpoint, although we do want to define and validate these concepts universally, but at the same time, we want to capture the complexity, plurality, and of how these concepts are understood. So compassion and systems thinking are the key components of the C learning program. So we want to understand how we want to understand how children embody the concepts such as compassion as they are developing, and also the systems thinking. We want to understand how we can create this compassionate system thinking can be embodied in children, and how we can pedagogically teach these concepts. Again, metaphors, analogies, stories, anecdotes are the ways in which people make sense of the world, and therefore we are interested in how these stories, metaphors will be used in understanding these concepts. And finally, we have, so these concepts that we want to explore needs to be explored within certain contexts. So the context that would be most relevant for the C learning are education programs, such as teacher education programs and curriculum and schools and parenting. So these are the three components, and they are all tied together, and that's how we are going forward with the concept development. And next, we have Dr. Brenton, who will talk about the global partnership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyra Lynn and Tenzin, for those presentations. Unfortunately, as you might have noticed in our morning session, our executive director, Dr. Losang Tenzin Negi, is just recovering from some health issues, so he's a little bit tired. So he's resting at the moment and won't be able to join us for this presentation. But I'd like to now just say a few words about our global partnerships. So what is... oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's the same presentation. So as my colleagues were mentioning, one of the central aspects of C learning and the success of C learning are our global partnerships. One of the very unique things about this program is that unlike any other social emotional learning program that I'm aware of, this program was developed to be a global program from the very beginning. That was the request that came from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, was to create a program for worldwide implementation from the beginning. So most programs would be created within one country. Thank you. Most programs would be created within one country and piloted in that country, and then maybe after many, many years translated to another language and then piloted somewhere else, and so on and so forth. But from the beginning, this has been intended to be a global program and has involved international partners from the very beginning. But right now, for it to succeed, we need the help of you all, of more partners around the world who can take this forward. And also partnership in a genuine sense of partnership, not in the sense of, you asking us, what to do, and following our instructions, but us learning from each other and collaborating. That's the only way that this can work and this can grow. So about 6 months ago, we created the International Program Committee. And this program committee, even before the launch, even before we had announced C-Learning or spread the word, just from people coming to us, already has 23 members from 14 different countries. And Mr. Sondu Sampal is our international program coordinator who coordinates this committee. And the purpose of this committee is for us to all share ideas and to advise the C-Learning program on what are the local conditions, the cultural conditions. How is this program going to work in different languages, different cultures, different educational systems? And how can we learn from each other? And to share knowledge. So these members of this committee have been meeting about once a month through teleconference or video conference. Many of them are here with us today. They've been helping with the translation of the curriculum. They've been testing things out in their schools. They've been helping us think about research and develop a research program. And this has been incredibly invaluable work. Now, the size of this committee could grow exponentially now that we've actually launched the program. So we could easily add, even just from the conversations that we've been having today and yesterday, another 70, 100, 200 people to this committee. That would make it untenable. So what we're trying to do now going forward is facilitate the creation of regional networks. So on their own accord, two of our colleagues organized a meeting just 2 days ago of European partners. There were some 35 people at that meeting representing countries all across Europe. So this European network is slowly starting to develop. We have colleagues in South America who have been contacting each other, and through the help of one of our colleagues there, Mr. Tsewang Punsok, they are starting to develop a network there. And just last evening, we had a meeting with about 70 Indian educators working in different organizations. And it seems like, perhaps there will be an Indian network also evolving. But what we need is more of these networks, people working together and working with us in the establishment of this. So we encourage you to take the initiative and explore the establishment of these networks for the exploration and promotion of C-Learning. Another aspect of these networks and these committees is research. So many of our international partners are very interested in research and assessment, and this is crucial to the success of the program. So as we know, increasingly, policymakers and education leaders are looking at research and assessment in their decisions. If you want to get the program into schools or into school districts, they're always going to wonder what the evidence base is for this. So we also have research subcommittees that are emerging. And we heard a bit from Tyra Lin and Tenzin Sonam about the research program, a broad research program. I should also mention that a few people were asking about the slides that they were using. So we will try to create a version of that and then place that on the online platform so that you can see all the slides, see the whole implementation framework and our emerging research framework as well. We are interested in, as you already heard, both qualitative and quantitative research. We have collaborators who are interested in anthropological and ethnographic research, and we promote all of this and are very happy to do interdisciplinary research in this way. In addition to implementing C-Learning as it is, using the curriculum materials that we have, the teacher training materials we have, and so forth, there's also the possibility of being a C-Learning affiliated program. So if you already have your program, you already have some materials, but you see there are things that are valuable in C-Learning that you'd like to use, you're very welcome to contact us and create a relationship in which you become an official C-Learning affiliated program. So you don't have to you can continue to do all the things that you're doing and just partner with us in that way. So we have those two options. We also have memoranda of understanding. that we have been signing with international partners, as well as partners within the United States, where we are based. We don't sign memoranda of understanding with individuals, but with organizations that are making a commitment to bring sea learning into their region. So if you're interested in that, feel free to be in contact with us. Although, as I mentioned, we're increasingly moving more towards this network model. So what I'd also like to say, and you've been hearing this in different ways, is that what we've tried to do is create a resource, you can say. We have been blessed with a great number of experts in developmental psychology and trauma and resilience, systems thinking, social and emotional learning, peace education, and we have tried to take all of this knowledge and put it together in a comprehensive framework and also developmentally appropriate curricula. But when it comes to implementation, there is not one standard implementation model that's going to work in the entire world. There's too much diversity in the world. So what we are asking you to do is to take this resource that we've developed, take the online platform, and explore it in your local context. Feel fully authorized to do that. It's not necessary to just wait for us, to instruct you what to do. This program was created for the world. And that's the great vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I would say even in the beginning when we started, we used to have very long debates about how to handle the issue of teacher preparation. So on the one hand, we had some people saying we need very intensive teacher preparation. It's very important. The teacher is the most important person. If the teacher doesn't understand compassion, doesn't understand empathy, doesn't model compassion and empathy, there's no way this can work. And on the other end of the scale, we had people saying, you have to create a teacher-proof curriculum, so that no matter how bad the teacher is, the kids are getting something. So make it teacher-proof, So these are completely, opposing views in terms of how you handle the issue of teacher preparation. But this is an empirical question. So what happened was, as we created the materials, they went out to the 600 educators, and they started testing them. And I'm being told to stop. So, so what happened was, and you've seen some examples of that Aspen High School asked us to come out and do an additional training. We couldn't do that. Our partners in Jordan, Yasmin Muna, who you heard from, said, can we have a training? We weren't able to do that. So out of necessity, they started using the program themselves. And what they found was this incredible thing, that they were having great experiences with the students. And that might not always be the case. But out of necessity, they took that step, they took the initiative, and they tried it out. So, and through that, they started to discover on their own what might work from their local context. And so the purpose of these international networks is that we learn from each other, but we will only learn from each other if we actually go and try it for ourselves. So we very much encourage you to do that. So thank you so much. We're going to now transition to the question and answer panel. So I'd like to invite the experts who will serve on that panel to come to the stage at this point. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's sometimes hard to listen and sit because didn't we eat well? Did you have a good lunch? I had a really good lunch as well. So I'm going to invite anyone who'd like to stand. So, and because one of the things that we haven't done, and also I'm going to invite people to sing. So do we have some singers in the group? Oh, we must have a few singers. So I'm sure, oh, look I'm getting more people to stand than I've said singing. Okay. So I'm hoping that many of you will know this song because I think this is so essential. I've heard His Holiness say one of the things that we look for is happiness, and there's happiness all around us, and there's also happiness in a song that I think some of you may know. So I'm going to start it, I'm gonna la 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 at first, and then I think you're gonna know the song. Okay, you ready? La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. The teachers are having fun right here. Okay. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, and your face will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, and your face will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. Now, I just added a new verse. If you're happy and you love sea learning, shout hooray. If you're happy and you love sea learning, shout hooray. If you're happy and you know it, and your face will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray. Thank you.
So, after that fun beginning from one of our panelists, actually, so she came straight here to sit with us. We have the Q&A session. So here's a chance for you to ask your questions. And some of you already have. So Carol announced just before, we broke for lunch to put your questions in a bowl somewhere. I know some of you were looking for the bowl and you didn't find the bowl. But we have a bowl there. Carol is there right at the back, still waving. So there is a bowl. To close these questions by about come from you. And Geshe-la is also going to join us, Dr. Negi, but only at about 2:45 for some time. And so please put in your questions if you have any, but we may not be able to take them. So I'm not going to take any time. My job is just to read the questions you put. Since I got to read them first, I got to do one. So none of these questions are for anybody in particular, so any of you want to pick it up, please pick it up. Sea learning, in acknowledging interdependence and systems thinking, understands that teachers and administrators have to embody the practices and outlook for the students to develop these capacities. However, sometimes a larger communal context of student, the kind of family, the cultural factors, may lead to them unlearning what they have learned during school or sea learning session. How could students and educators help sustain the aware, compassionate, engaged outlook in themselves outside the classroom when the world culture may not reciprocate this and not resort to unwholesome, unhealthy attitudes and actions? Anybody wants to go?
I think that the practicing of the sea learning principles, and I'm going to address the chapter 2 a little bit, and then maybe others can address the other chapters, but that we know that our children sometimes live in very harsh environments. But when they're in the school environment, if we teach them how to continue to feed their wellness, how to pay attention to the sensations of wellness, how to bring forth those lessons about kindness, that when they get home, you can also strategize with them about how they can implement the learnings from the classroom in their home environment. Because maybe there may be a moment when they feel safer, that they may be able to remember, oh, I'll think about my resource. My resource is my teacher, who's so kind to me. And we will invite the child, when they're learning that, to notice the sensations connected with it. It's kind of like it saves it to their hard drive. So they take that with them wherever they go. So I think the continued practice, and I think this is one of the questions that came up yesterday too, that to continue it from grade level to grade level, because the more that you continue to remind them, again, it's what we said yesterday about the neurons that fire together, wire together. The more that we give them conditions in the classroom to help their well-being, the more they can translate it not only into their home, but into their community.
I think it's a very good question. You know, if the child is being taught compassion in the school, but then goes in the other classes or goes home to the home life and there's no compassion there, or in the community there's no compassion, isn't that going to kind of undo what is learned? That's how I understood the question. Now, I think if it's wrong to lie, it's wrong to steal, you know, you must do this, and it's just kind of a faith-based or belief-based approach, just someone telling you something, then that could easily happen. You know, you're told, you know, it's wrong to lie, but then you go, you know, you see other people lying and nobody seems to mind, and other people are saying, oh, you should lie and everything, you become influenced, right? But C-learning is not that type of program. It's based on personal experience and reason and critical inquiry. This is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been emphasizing. So it's not just someone saying don't lie because, you know, we told you so. It's about investigating. What does it feel like in your body? You know, what did it feel like? What was the experience like, you know, when you're telling the truth and you trust somebody, right? What does it feel like when you lied and then someone found out you lied? How did that feel like? You know, which would you rather have? And what would happen in our society if in our relationships if we were all lying to each other instead of telling the truth, right? So when someone gains conviction on the basis of their own experience and reason, it's very difficult to undo that conviction. So earlier we heard, you know, 2 + 2 = 4. If you learn 2 + 2 = 4, and then you understand that through experience and through reason, and you become convinced of that, you know, then there's so much to verify that in your world. Then you go among a community and they say, well, 2 + 2 = 12. You will not be convinced, oh, you know, oh, I guess I was wrong, 2 + 2 = 12. You'll say, oh, I feel sorry for those people. They don't know that 2 + 2 = you know, 4. In a similar way, someone who has conviction in these things might go to a community where everybody is lying and stealing and doing other things, and they would just say, oh, I feel sorry, because they don't understand the negative impact of what this is happening. And we have many examples of children already learning these skills and then going and teaching adults and helping adults when they don't see. You know, they feel sorry for the adult. Oh, you don't understand. You're stressed. That's why you're angry now. That's why you're doing this. But let me help you.
We had an example this morning asking questions about the car, and so influencing adults as well. Would anybody else like to respond to the same question?
I would just say quickly, from the point of human development, we know that both schools and family have important socializing influences, and research on resilience for children growing up in particularly adverse contexts does suggest that often it can just be one person who sees or believes in that person that can really make a difference in their life. So I don't think we should underestimate the power that we can have in the time that we have with the young ones. And I would just reinforce what Brendan said. I think Kim and I have seen in other SEL programs that we've worked with where there's spontaneous transfer of the children, bringing that practice home. And then as the program grows, often schools hold parent information nights to inform the parents about what's going on and to welcome them as partners. So these are all strategies there, I think.
Just to add to that, it is so important to think. I know sometimes it seems overwhelming because you're like, there's so many problems in the world. Could this program, just my little effort, be making a difference? And it really can, you know, and the research is really showing that that can make a difference by just having one important adult, even if it's not in the home. And I think, you know, I think of that quote, I think it by Margaret Mead, that, you know, how a small group of people can change the world, and that's the way it's always happened, something to that effect. And so I think we just have to keep that inspiration and optimism to keep on chipping away in each of our own ways to do that, and soon it will blossom and grow.
Okay, wonderful. So something on similar lines, still working with the children, what strategies can educators employ when addressing moments of high tension, especially with little learners who are still learning self-regulation?
Oh, there's so many things that you can do. I mean, if there, we have the 3 concepts in chapter 2. One's called the high zone, and that's maybe the tension when they're really upset, and you try to talk with them and they can't listen. And one is the low zone, where they're very disconnected. They may even feel numb, and you try to talk to them, they may fall to the floor, and they don't seem like they're hearing what you're saying. You've all seen children like that, yeah? Yes, okay. And then there's the okay zone, the resilient zone, where they're back to their better self. So when they're if they're way in the high zone, any one of the help now strategies can sometimes be very helpful. I mean, sometimes talking to them at that point, because their prefrontal cortex may be offline, is not the best thing to do. So it may be giving them a glass of water. It may be saying, oh, maybe we can just touch if they're on the floor, can you touch the carpet? Is it rough? Is it cold? What's the temperature? Because when you do those things, it starts to help them, if they're in the high zone, down-regulate to get back into the okay zone, or up-regulate to get back into the okay zone. And that's the amazing thing about the Help Now strategies. If they're in the high or low zone, they help them get back into the okay zone.
Should we go with the next question? Or anybody else wants to respond? Okay, here's an interesting one. Given traditional conditioning of boys to disconnect from their emotions as weak, irrational, and devalued by their association as feminine, where in the C learning curriculum is there scope to address gender conditioning explicitly? It seems as if gender is not addressed, patriarchal conditioning will often undo whatever is taught via C learning.
I can address the question of whether it's explicitly addressed in the curriculum, and then defer to my colleagues on the wider issues. Although there is a section in the curriculum that deals with diversity, what do we have in common, and what ways are we different? Now, this is a place where educators, if they're particularly interested in this issue, could go deep into this issue. So, we created, there's so many different types of diversity and so many contexts. So we created this in an open-ended way so you can take it in different directions. If you ask where is it already explicitly about gender, the answer is no, it's not there, because it was designed to be an open category. But I would like to say, a general note about the curriculum is that the curriculum as it's written is a starting point, it's not the end point. So I think it allows you, a structure to go forward, and then you can take it and develop this further. I would also, in some of the earlier work we did in compassion training, we worked with foster children, and we worked with boy classes and girl classes, and classes of boys and girls. And I recall one time some of these, one of the boys saying, here we talk about love and compassion and everything. When I leave this classroom, I can't tell anybody what we talk about here, because it just sounds, it's just too against the culture. But so what that told me is that if the space is a safe space there, and trust is built up among the students and with the teacher, it's amazing the depth that can come out, despite all these stereotypes that are there in society. I don't know, Rob, Kim, if you...
Yes, I totally agree. And I think, from a developmental standpoint, so there's a couple of things. One is to really start early. This is one thing why doing this, particularly in the early years, to start, and even though you have these different grade levels, the idea would be to start when they're really young, so it just becomes a way of speaking about emotions, and even if it's not sanctioned by the larger society, they still are, that's how you change the society, is by starting and being able to do that. And it's also interesting of the socialization, so for example, I know of some work in the area of empathy, Whereas when you give a measure, a self-report measure of empathy to males and females or boys and girls, guess who scores higher? And measures of empathy. I'm asking you, like, who scores higher? Females, girls. But when you do a physiological measure of empathy through heart rate, by looking at heart rate and show kind of an empathy-inducing film, there are no gender differences. So I guess it's just to say that we really all have that capacity, and even though there might be things against that, talking about emotions, the way to, it's so critical for successful development, to develop an emotional language, to be able to speak. It just helps develop social emotional competence and well-being and all of that. So I guess just, yeah, continue to do it.
Would you like to share?
I just want to say that I think it's a critical point. I experienced this in university, teaching these concepts to young men and women, and we talk a lot about related virtues like courage and protection of others, and we talk about how compassion can be fierce in terms of developing boundaries. And so I do think, I'm not an expert on the curriculum, but I do think attending to the relationship of the way we language and think about this to prevailing gender roles is absolutely essential. I think hypermasculinity is the unspoken problem in many of our societies, driving many of the problems in the United States, things like police violence and the like. If you actually look at the research, it's because oftentimes police officers feel their masculinity is being threatened. So I think starting early, giving language, showing the value of both being vulnerable and strong in relationships, these are all really critical and potentially transformative sites for a curriculum like this.
Elaine, do you want to say? So there are a lot of questions, I think, around. There's a pattern I'm noticing is the outside world and the C-learning classroom, right? That kind of interrelationships. There's another one, I think, in the same line. In C-learning, does it teach children how to protect themselves? If you see people as kind and good, but they actually try to hurt us, does C-learning help children to distinguish what's good or not good to them?
So this is a very important question, and it connects with what Rob was saying earlier, that compassion can be fierce. You know, compassion does not mean weakness. Compassion, at least the way that we are approaching it, the way as long as the Dalai Lama talks about it, and the way increasingly it's being studied in science, compassion is about what's doing what is best in the interests of others, and including, however, oneself among others. So it doesn't mean being a doormat or allowing other people to abuse you. And in fact, in chapter 6 of the curriculum, which is on compassion for self and others, there is a lesson on active compassion. And the specific examples are when you need to say no to someone, when you need to stand up to someone. And there's some very interesting preliminary research showing that contemplative practice and the cultivation of compassion actually increases people's ability to say no. Because, and this, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says the same thing, that when you cultivate compassion, it increases your self-confidence. It increases, you know, that sense of agency. So this is very important to understand. Otherwise, we would think, you know, teaching compassion and kindness is going to lead children to be, you know, victims their entire lives. But that's very wrong.
The other part is that we help children learn to trust their sensations and to learn about sensations. It's a whole new portal of awareness that has been left out of many other kinds of models of intervention about helping children understand not only their feelings, but their sensations. I'm just going to ask you all a question. Have you ever had a gut feeling and you overrode it and you regretted it? Look at that, I see that all over, yes. And so we're trying to help children understand that gut feeling, that really is something to pay attention to. And even if someone's coming towards you and they're being manipulative, in terms of, oh, here's some candy, and the child's feeling, this is not right, although they have a smile on their face. Their sensory system may have a response, even though they may have been even socialized to be polite to someone. So that whole portal of sensation and information that the children are now gathering to also help guide them really also helps protect them.
Yes, I really love this idea. I almost wonder if the idea of satyagraha, the force of ethical truth, is a sensation, a kind of knowing in the body that confers this confidence and this ability not to be fearless, but to act in spite of fear in some ways. I don't believe that courage is the absence of fear. It's sort of acting despite it. So I think this idea of embodiment on this point is so important. So thank you for that.
So here, two questions that I see connected. And so I'm going to read both of them because there's some little difference of element. So this is, I think it's in the context of what can people who learn sea learning, young people, children, can they be bringing something into the world as well? Like, for example, I just read it out. I think that's the best. At what point in the sea learning curriculum would it be a good place to integrate specific conflict resolution skills like nonviolent communication or other such models for conflict dialogue? And the other question, which is different, from a different person, I can guess from the handwriting, is how does sea learning complement conflict resolution programs? And is there a danger of a compassionate learner not feeling confident addressing injustice?
Everyone's looking at me. So the curriculum questions I'm happy to take. The field of conflict resolution, conflict transformation, and peace education has heavily informed the development of the sea learning program. And we've drawn from the work of Galtung and other leading thinkers in this area. One of our curriculum members and curriculum writers and team members, Krista Tenari, also has a strong background in this field, in peace education in schools in particular. So I think as you read the framework and especially read the curriculum, you will see a lot of the parallels there. In terms of the issue of communication, chapters 5 and 6 deal with the social domain, dealing with others. There are practices there of mindful listening, mindful dialogue, communication in there. That would be one possible, a very appropriate way of bringing in nonviolent communication. The idea of feelings and needs is also explored in chapter 4 in the discussion of emotions. So there's a very clear platform there to bring in, if you wish, even more explicitly areas of nonviolent communication, conflict transformation, and so on. Also, I think the sea learning framework itself is addressing the root causes of conflict, which are at many, many different levels. Conflict isn't perpetuated just because of one thing. So in Galtung's model, for example, one of the first steps in conflict transformation going to positive peace is trauma conciliation. So if you're not dealing with the trauma that comes from violence and cyclical violence, how are you going to establish peaceful relations where people genuinely respect each other? Even if they have that idea in their mind, in their body, when they see the person or the group of people, or they see the images or whatever, their body is going to react. And if they don't know how to deal with that on the level of trauma and resilience in their own body, are you going to be able to have genuine dialogue and everything? As Elaine said so rightly, the dialogue and the thoughts, that's all up here, that's higher cognition. But the trauma is, goes much deeper. So this is the first step, Then empathy, the development of empathy and the ability to listen, the ability to engage in dialogue. So the social dimension, this is very, very important. And lastly, protracted conflict is a systems problem. So thinking, systems thinking about, okay, if I harm you and you harm me back, and then I have to harm you and you have to harm me and my side harms you, this is, yeah, you have to do systems thinking. You don't have to do much systems thinking to realize that this is not going to lead anywhere good, right? So these are explicitly the kinds of things we have in the curriculum. So we really hope that people interested in conflict transformation and peace education will look at this program and we'll be able to learn more from each other.
I'm going to add something. This just happened to me last week, actually. I was in a kind of a conflictual situation with someone, but I now know how to sense my body. And maybe some of you are like me. I could feel my ears starting to get really hot. And so there's a temperature change when I feel myself leaving, or the risk of leaving my resilient zone and getting into my high zone, which wouldn't be good for a conversation in conflict resolution. Has anybody ever had that experience with hot ears besides me? Oh my goodness, my brothers and sisters are in the room. Okay, so when we start paying attention to that, and I could start to feel that heat, what I did is I grounded. I felt my feet on the ground, I actually repositioned myself, and I could feel my temperature coming down. Again, I'm tracking my body, and then I was saying things that I could regret. I'm sure I'm the only one that's ever said things that they regretted. No, I'm sure I have people that have had that experience too. So it's really important that we have that in such a basic way for the children to start learning how to track their body, even with a temperature change, to think, oh, maybe this is a time that I might ground. I take a breath, I come back into my zone, and now I can talk to my friend on the playground and say, it's not nice when you hit me or you try to push me down.
These are very simple and seem so powerful.
Just briefly, for those of you who are interested in the Mind and Life 33 that was held in Dharamsala, there was an example of another beautiful curriculum that was using nonviolent communication with very young children. And they had, I think what's necessary is they had scaffolds, little cards and things to remind the children, the young children whose working memories and vocabularies weren't well developed, how to practice those skills. And just to sort of reiterate what's been said, we know that the ability to label sensations and emotions with words is what confers a psychological distance, an ability to sort of stand back from and work with that experience. And so the value of developing a vocabulary for what one is sensing and feeling in conflict situations or stressful situations is actually fundamental to developing self-regulation or emotion regulation. So words, giving words turns out to be such a key predicate to doing the kind of complex conflict resolution that we're hearing about.
Any other? So I'm going to change track a little bit. I think there's some questions around the way the C-Learning program has been conceived, right? And some of the practices in the program itself. So I thought there's some interesting questions. So this one, it says, I admire the openness, but isn't there a risk in offering the material so completely generously? At everybody's disposal, that it might get distorted? Is it really teacher-proof? Now Brendan is on the hot seat.
I don't know, I don't think, yeah, I mean, my personal, none of us in our team like the term teacher-proof, and I don't think anything is teacher-proof. I think teachers are very important. Yes, shout out to all the teachers. You know, perhaps after being a parent, the most important job that we have on this planet is that of teachers. So, is there a risk? You know, I mean, quite honestly, in our team, early on, you know, we created the material and we were a little bit careful about who we shared it with and the copies. I mean, this is the way of our society. This is what you do, right? You create something and you don't just give it to everybody. But of course, we were asked to create this for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We created the first version of the program, which was called Secular Ethics in Education, about 3.5 to 4 years ago. Some of the people using the program were using this earlier version. This was sent to the Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He gave it to an institution in Dharamsala called the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, asked them to start printing off copies, and just gave it, everyone he met, he gave it to them. He met President Obama, you know, gave it. So this is just going everywhere around the world. So then schools are contacting us. I mean, even recently, so for the past 3 years, schools and people just contact us and say, oh, you know, we just ended up with this book. And
I also got a copy, by the way.
So, and we didn't want to give you a copy, specifically.
I didn't know you.
So, I don't feel like any harm happened. In fact, many good things happened. Many good things happened because of that. So, His Holiness is a very forward thinker. You know, this program is innovative in many different ways, and that's one of them. So we will see, but I think we have more trust now from our experience.
I think the other exciting thing about the openness of it is the generativity that will come from it. Just from some of the teachers I've spoken to and some of the things that they've created that have come out of the program have been unbelievably creative that I hadn't seen it anywhere in the curriculum, but they generated. So I like to look at it from the other perspective of, because it is free, because you have given them permission to contextualize it, that wow, we're going to see some pretty creative things from all over the world. And many of you are sitting here right now. Yeah, look at that.
I would like to defer to Kim, because she has a lot of, you know, we don't want to give the impression that implementation is not important. And actually we stress that. So even though the program is free, the proper implementation of the program is still, I think, what would be most valuable, if you agree.
Yeah, so I like that consideration of the idea, do no harm. I mean, we really want to go forward with the curriculum. And I will tell you that the science on at least mindfulness practice with children, it's not really clear of the benefits or the risks, you know, so we don't have the strong science there. It's still an emerging research. I think the idea that teachers will now be scaffolded to be able to have the online training. And if you've noticed that the online training, that you actually can't download the program until you actually have gone through the training. And that's in a way to really make sure people have the skills and capacities to do that. But I'd say a couple of different things. One, I think that, and this will be part of those learning communities, how critical it is to have people working together and talking with each other and having a community of practice and going back and like, I tried this, but the kids all groaned and nobody wanted to do anything, or they were all restless, and someone would say, you know, I had that too, but once I tried it for a while longer, it really worked. You just have to hang in there. So teachers talking to teachers who, for that. And I think the other thing to really keep in mind, I mean, this implementation and support is most teachers, almost the majority, have not had anything in their teacher preparation on social and emotional learning. You know, so they have not had any of this background, how you implement these programs, how you promote emotional development in children. I mean, I think, Rob, you were on a panel that helped look at child development in teacher preparation and find that basically many of the programs might have one course on child development, but it's often in a psychology class and doesn't even tell you how to apply it in the classroom, so, or is very outdated. So I think we really don't, I mean, on the one hand, I think it's great to say, get it into the hands of teachers, they all know what to do, but I think there's a lot of variation in how much they know what to do. I think some teachers will feel because it's kind of where they are, another teachers not so much, and if they start trying it and it doesn't work, they might abandon it. So you really need to have that, that idea of the support.
Yeah, if I could just reiterate, I think there's a learning with that goes on here, and I think our own development is essential to the success of C learning as educators. And I've noticed in a course that I've created where we want to give it away at the university level, there's sometimes a yearning to get the students to be somewhere else. There's a rush to that. And so I don't think we can reiterate enough the importance of our own practice and development and learning with as the important crucible for this being a real success, in addition to the creativity and the generosity that comes from this large crowdsourcing of C learning. There's a pretty strong responsibility on the part of us adults to create the conditions where those seeds can really take root and flower. So I just think that's an important take-home message here.
So speaking of teacher education, and Kim, you're also referring to the training that is online, I think there's a question connected with that. For developing compassion, there is need for long practice to develop it. How can an educator be able to deliver it? How can an educator deliver it without developing it in self? And is the training time we have in mind for an educator is sufficient to develop such qualities?
I can try it and then maybe. Well, a couple of things. So we don't really know that it's an empirical question of how long it takes to develop compassion. I don't know if any studies, Rob, do you have, ones that actually, so does it take 2 weeks? Can you do it in 10 weeks? Can you do it in 15 weeks?
Lifetime?
Lifetime, so I guess, that's, with adults, I think it's important to, I know there's compassion-based, CBCT, and looking at that, but I think that, anyway, so I think the idea that's a good question to figure out what happens. But I will tell you some of the recent findings from social and emotional learning programs are now looking at if teachers, just by delivering the programs, not that they did a program from themselves, but just by teaching the students, they're actually finding benefits to the teachers with delivering a program. So I think on the one hand, I understand there might be some skepticism. That's what I'm sort of reading into it. Like, can you really do this in such a short time? And I'd say we don't know 100%, but try it out, see what happens. And then also realizing that there could be, just by teachers learning these things alongside the kids as well, and to see what happens.
Any other response to that?
I think there's a kind of, there's an interesting spectrum, continuum. On the one hand, neither of which extreme seems to make sense, at least to me personally. Not that I think anybody is all the way on one end or the other. But on the one end, we have this tendency to think, well, the educator is so important in modeling these virtues like compassion. So the educator must be compassionate. Only a compassionate educator could possibly teach children compassion. So then all the educators have to be compassionate. But how do you make them compassionate? So that's difficult, and it would take a long time. And then you would think, well, the earlier we started making them compassionate, the better, right? They're more malleable. So, maybe when they're younger, like they're in their college, we should start. But then actually, when they're teenagers, it's better to start then, right? Then they'll be more compassionate. Then middle school, then kindergarten. Then what are you doing now? You're teaching children to be more compassionate so that they can be more compassionate educators. I'm too tired. I didn't articulate that very well. But you see the chicken, it's a chicken and the egg question, right? So you have to start somewhere, So you can't wait until all the educators are super compassionate. And then you can't also start and just say, well, only the super compassionate teachers can teach C learning. Then, it's going to take forever, right? So we just have to start with where we are. Let's just start now. I mean, this is how I've been hearing His Holiness message, not just these 3 days, but for the last many years. Start, do something. We can't wait, So I think we have to do it.
But Brendan, there's been a question that has been coming up, which I think has some value. What about a C learning curriculum for non-malleable adults? Or less malleable adults, let's put it like that. Is that a need? And should that be also looked at now? Or is that in your plans or maybe your dreams or something?
But non-malleable, by definition, means we can't do anything. So I
Okay,
think we
less
just have to
malleable.
give
I
up on
corrected
that.
myself.
We have
Remember
many excellent
neuroplasticity.
programs. Kim mentioned the cognitively based compassion training program, which is at Emory University, that predates.
Can you say a little bit more about it? I think someone else was also asking me outside during lunch or something.
Sure.
They've heard about CBCT, but that's all they knew.
Sure. And I just saw, very fortunately, our director, Dr. Negi, has entered, and also he is the developer of the cognitively based compassion training program. He can say some words on it, I think. Also, other universities, Stanford University has the compassion cultivation program here. We have here the director of the Charter for Compassion, which is a worldwide movement. There are adult education programs for the cultivation of compassion, and there's a lot of research on them also. So we haven't given up entirely on the adults.
Thank you.
That's great.
I wouldn't want you to give up on me.
I was just going to add one more thing. Sorry, I just remembered there was a recent research study published a couple of years ago in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and it was trying to help teachers have an empathic mindset to students' misbehavior versus a punitive mindset. And what they did is they randomly assigned, it was like a really well-designed study, to have teachers, high school teachers, for half of them, take two very short online courses where they learned about why it was important to have an empathic understanding or a compassionate interpretation of a student's misbehavior. And they first started with some of the research, and then they gave some stories about the students and how students reacted. Those two short online courses actually cut high school suspension rates in half at the schools through two short online courses, just to get teachers to see students' misbehavior from a compassionate lens, to say, well, they weren't put on earth to make your life misery. They're not misbehaving because they're trying to control you, but just to understand students' behavior. So that shows some real promise for showing this might not be rocket science. It might be able to happen pretty quickly.
The one thing I would add in the work that we've done in thinking about systems change in this regard is we had a kind of a working principle that it didn't make sense to run uphill immediately. And so there may be people in every school. I suspect everyone who's come here is what we would call early adopters. And these are you're the trailblazers. And sometimes in schools I've worked in, we start small, and then people become more interested as they see this. And so having a realistic timeline and thinking about starting with a group that's very enthusiastic and interested, rather than starting with the resistors, which means you're going to be running uphill initially, and that's always hard, may be a useful way to think about how to disseminate this even within a single school or a district. Just finding, we had a principle always, one person plus yourself plus at least one person, that you needed to have a friend who really believed in this, or a principal should always have one other person who can help them navigate and make a path. And then others will come if it's showing benefit, has been our experience.
So I see Geshe-la is here, and we are running out of time, but there's one question. I think we've not covered this area at all. Actually, two questions together. I'm just going to read them out. They're both about assessment of the impact of C-learning in the children. This is what I sense from it. So the first question, I'll read both questions, and they're both connected. I think you could answer together. What assessment methods are best suited for C-learning? Self-assessment, peer assessment, assessment by teachers? That's A part of the same question. And what should assessment hope to achieve? Example, surely not end of term or end of year tests or grades, right? But the other question is a little more sort of radical, I would say. Why do we need to assess C-learning? It says psychological functions have not received attention due to our obsession with measurement and making psychology a science. My fear is that C-learning evaluation will dilute the curriculum, content, and practice.
I can start. Or do you want to start? I'll just go. So first of all, the type of assessment, so I'll address the first question. The type of assessments depend on exactly what your questions are. And what we know from research, generally you want to have multi-method, a multi-informant. So you have multiple people assessing depending on what kind of questions you want. So it's a difficult answer because it all depends on what you want to examine. And as Tyrone actually said very well, and you can assess all the way along the way. It doesn't have to be just outcome research. Anyway, but I'll get to the second one, which I love that provocative question, like why do we need to assess everything? I think what happens sometimes is we think that it's just common sense. Of course you do this program and kids are going to get better. But that's not always true. I'll give you one example. So there could be, for example, this is Mark Greenberg's research. He was doing some research on a program called PATHS, Promoting Alternative Thinking Skills, a social emotional learning program across multiple schools. And they did pre and post outcomes, and they found, guess what? They found no significant changes at all. They had done all this program and found nothing across. But when they actually looked at the schools in which there was high principal support, in which the principal supported it, he or she knew about the program, when they separated those programs from the programs where the principal wasn't even sure what was happening, that is where they found the positive outcomes. Then that tells us, by doing that research, that actually one of the key ingredients is support of the leader. So it isn't until we can actually understand what are the conditions. The research will help us identify what are the conditions in which we can have optimal outcomes for students. And just so you know, there's lots of studies that have really well-meaning programs that have no positive outcomes. And there's, I think the one thing to know with CASTLE, with their meta-analysis, where they showed a high-quality program, SEL program, needs to have 4 characteristics using the acronym SAFE. It had to be sequenced, active, focused, and explicit. And they found that those 4 key ingredients seem to be essential to have a program be effective.
The one thing I'll just add quickly is I think there's support that will be available, but I don't think anyone is expecting everyone to become a researcher. But in our own work in the schools, we found one of the most important questions that's often relevant to stakeholders and policy makers is, would you recommend this to other teachers like you? And simple data like that can really be formative in making the case that teachers agree. So we don't always have to jump to the student assessment. I think we saw a beautiful plan for evaluation, just starting with what worked, what would you change, would you recommend it to others? That kind of data can be very compelling for school officials and funders often, and set the predicate, if desired, for subsequent studies of student outcomes. So I think it can be relatively simple and informative, or what we call formative, in the beginning.
Bren, you'd like to take that? Or no? Ellen?
Let me say something. I'm a non-researcher, and I have found that when we have a research-informed practice, I can go to an administrator, like you say, and say, we don't have all the information yet, but this is what we have so far, and will you consider this? And so if we didn't have that, some people would never look at any program at all. So I have learned to really appreciate getting even the information in the beginning before we have randomized controlled trials, because it can be a portal to get innovation and new ideas through the door.
Yeah, I'd just say, I mean, as my colleagues have already said very well, I mean, assessment can be many, many different things. It doesn't just have to be reductive and outcome assessments and so on. If you don't assess your program, how are you going to know how to improve it? And secondarily, on what's your confidence based on in your program? I mean, is it just faith? You just believe that it must be great, so you just keep doing it and you keep inflicting your program on other people, even though they're not getting better? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. not only do we have studies showing that there are programs that have no impact, we have studies that show negative effects. I think His Holiness's approach to science is a very broad one, including the Nalanda tradition, but it's based on critical inquiry. It's not based on blind faith. It's based on reality, investigating, learning, improving. It's an ongoing process. So that's the spirit in which we're doing this. So it's not to be reductive, but it's to learn and keep making the program better and better and better.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm going to invite Keshila now on stage. He was supposed to be part of this panel, but... oh yeah, there's another chair. So, you only listened to the last part of it because I was constantly checking for you and I suddenly saw you there and I wasn't seeing you for a while. So, based on the questions that kind of came up, would you like to sum it up or something else you'd like to say? I mean, you're free to we'll have you as the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to take part in this expert panel session. For that matter, all the afternoon sessions today and yesterday. As you have heard, that I've not been feeling well, and so I had to be really watchful of my health, and that was the reason. But all the wonderful panelists that we have here today, yesterday, I'm sure that they have done an incredible job. So I want to thank all of you. I also want to particularly thank our organizers here, the Vana Foundation and the Dalai Lama Trust, along with our own Emory University's staff. They have been incredible. 3 people I would just specifically mention. Nishant ji from Vana Foundation. Kumatempa Seringla from the Dalai Lama Trust. And Carol Beck from Emory University. They really, 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 really made it possible. There was so many details. I had collapsed, but they put it up so beautifully. So I'm very, very grateful. I'm also very grateful to all the educators, every one of you here. Some of you have traveled from far away, and it means a lot to us, to this program, for Sea Learning. We really, we really need your support. And the fact that you are here, that indicates that, yes, we have your support. So I want to thank you very much, not only those who came from far away, but from even from the Delhi area itself. Each and every one of you, I want to thank you. What I want to say is that this is just a beginning. Sea Learning launch is just a beginning. Whether this will be successful or not will depend on how well we will be able to implement. Now, my colleague, Dr. Brendan Osava de Silva, must have spoken earlier about the global partners that we are forming. But for here in India, moving forward, how we would want to disseminate this program in India. For that, I want to invite 3 individuals on the platform and who will give you an information about how you can be part of the Sea Learning in India. And these 3 individuals, Raviji, please, and Reshmaji, and Nehaji.
We won't take too long. And incidentally, Brendan, my father reminded me yesterday that almost 3 years ago to the date, him and I had gone to Dharamsala for a meeting with His Holiness on a totally different subject, and we got one of those books. So that's how I found out about sea learning. So obviously those books helped. Actually, we just very gently wanted to announce that we have an intention to form a body here in India, either a trust or a society, to help facilitate sea in India. By we, I mean many of us who've been trying to gather momentum in these last few months and the last couple of years. I'm not referring to Vana Foundation in particular, I'm referring to all of us. So Ravi, Neha, Reshma, myself, Vivek, Ankit, and several of our friends who've been helping out. This body will not restrict or control the use of sea in India, though we do have support from Emory and the Dalai Lama Trust to create it. So institutions are free to, do as they please, continue having their own relationships with Emory. But for those that do want help, do want facilitation, we hope to be able to provide it in some way. We're yet to iron out the details, but we will share information as soon as we have it. And the intention is also to create committees or chapters in other parts of the country to provide more localized support. So we will hope to write to everyone in about 90 days, sharing some more details. Neha, you wanted to also?
So, first of all, thank you, Veer. And as we go back home, energized with all our curriculums and with all the information and the new knowledge that we've taken in these last 2 days, I just want to bring our attention to all the support that Emory has created for all of us to take this and, to empower us in multiple different ways to take this back in our own individual context. So not to forget that the first immediate thing that we have available is the online platform. I would invite and encourage each one of us to go back and do that, because I was doing that right away, and I realized that maybe we hadn't shared the link of the online platform, and I quickly ran up to one of the staff members and said, can you please give me the link, because I really want to see that right away. So just for all of us to know, the link is sealearning.emory.edu, which is sealearning.emory.edu. And I would just request each one of us to go back as anybody who's interested in taking sea learning forward to do that. And as Veer mentioned, there will be other channels for us to engage offline, as all of us to get together in our own regional context. Thank you.
And in the interim, if there are any questions, inquiries, any interest in collaboration, do write to us. We have an email address here. It is sealearning, S-E-E, learning, all one word, .india@gmail.com. Humble request, please be patient. While we organize ourselves, we'll get back to you, but definitely do not hesitate in sending out whatever questions, suggestions, requests you have, and we'll be happy to get back as soon as we are settled and ready to take on all the wonderful and exciting opportunities that we can possibly envision with this wonderful program. Thank you very much.
So before we invite Nishanji for the formal vote of thanks, I just wanted to remind ourselves that this program for educating heart and mind, the C learning, the educating heart and mind, is really the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for the whole world, to benefit only the world. You know, that is we have heard this morning how urgent he sees that, you know, the values, the basic human values, they need to be promoted. That lacking those, that we would have serious ongoing problems. As someone has said, that demise of the character is the demise of a society. Demise of the basic human values will be the demise of the society as well. So please do keep His Holiness in your thoughts and prayers, you know, that we would need His Holiness's continuous inspiration and guidance for this work to grow and to flourish. And please do pray for his good health and for him to be with us for many, many, many more years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank my panelists. It got a little bit hijacked, so to just thank everyone here, Kim, Geshila, Elaine, Brandon, Robert. Thank you so much. I didn't get to ask any of my own questions. I didn't get to answer any questions, but I got to sit in His Holiness's seat, so I'm very happy. Oh, I think we keep sitting. Oh, I'm happy.
Namaste, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, for his vision, and Emory University for converting that vision into the most wonderful framework and the curriculum. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, the World Fair participants, and all our guests from across the globe who have traveled this far, especially for this global launch. And a very special thank you to the Office of His Holiness, to Tampala, to Geshe Laktorla, Truptan Sewang, Lakpa Shering, Nima, Tenzin Daya, Don Shejor, and their teams, to Geshe Lobsang Negi, Carol, Brendan, Lindy, Sondu Samphal, and Dawa Sherin from the Emory team. Special thank to the Saraf family, to Madhav Sehgal, and the entire Andaz team for their hospitality. And yes, of course, from our organizing committee and friends in India, Ravi Gulati, Neha Bhatia, Nilza Wangmo, Ankit Chabra, Kaveri Gill, Reshma Piramal, Vivek Kumar, Vedant Jain, and to Veer and the Vana Foundation team, to Regine. Thank to all the volunteers from the Bureau Office of His Holiness who helped us for the event. A special thank to the Tenzin Gyatso science scholars who helped manage the registration desk. Thanks to the Secretary and Director Education, Delhi Government, for making it possible for the principals and mentors of Delhi government schools to come. And finally, a special thank to everyone who worked to put the event together. Vikas from Insignia, the global sound management team, Debjani Majumdar for the beautiful flowers which you see around, and of course the green wall, the global travel agency, and the Nobu Graphics for printing these curriculum in all languages possible. Last but not the least, to all our wonderful and special audience which had gathered here with a common purpose. And we sincerely wish that the C curriculum makes its ways to most of the schools around the world and in India. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.